You can't be slightly pregnant with a startup. A lot of people say, I'm doing my job and then I have this startup and when it becomes big, I'll leave my job. No. That's not happening, right? Because your startup will never become big until you leave your job and give it full time. You either would be in or you're out. Startups look really glamorous from the outside. Unicorns, funding rounds, exits, all of these things. But it's a grind. It's a roller coaster. And the amount of failure that you will face, nobody's ready for. Or I wasn't ready for. And we are impatient in general. As people and as generation, but also we over philosophize things, right? The one question a lot of founders ask me now that I'm on the investor side or on the mentor side, what's the best way to start? My answer to that question always is the best way to start is to start. Just start, right? Make your mistakes and learn. Instead of philosophizing for 3 months, make 3 months of mistakes. But let's say you're climbing a mountain in the Himalayas and you start climbing and there's a landslide somewhere or the weather is not good somewhere else, right? You want to get to the peak, but you may go back down, switch the route, change the path. You want to get to the same goal, but changing the path to get to the same objective or being flex with that, that's very important.
Welcome back inside another episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast. In this episode, I have Arjun Vaidya, founder of Dr. Vaidya's. Arjun is the first Ayurvedic entrepreneur to be listed on Forbes 30 under 30 and Business World 40 under 40 list. In 2016, Arjun quit his job to take forward his family's legacy of healing people by taking Ayurveda to the doors of Indian. Dr. Vaidya's is seen as one of the most successful acquisitions in Indian D2C space. In this episode of the Inspiring Talk podcast, we discuss about the early lessons and values that Arjun picked from his grandfather. We talk about humility. We talk about finding the right partner for your business. And also there's a lot of insights that you can learn from Arjun and his take or the lessons that he learned from business that you can implement in your life. This episode is full of insights and knowledge. I'm sure you are going to find a lot of value and inspiration in this conversation. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Arjun.
Thank you so much, Vijay. I'm excited to be on the podcast with you. Been waiting for this. We've been planning it for a while. So happy to do it in person and have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll start from one of these posts that you have made on LinkedIn, okay? As a founder and in life, I've always focused on next 100 days, not next 5 years or 10 years.
Yeah, so look, I think if you ask me about where I see myself even today, 5 years later, I don't know. And if you asked me 5 years ago, would I see myself here 5 years later? The answer is, I don't know, right? I won't have known. Specifically for the startup journey, right? While all of us know our vision, our mission, where we want to get in the long term, tangibly, for me, I have seen success in setting up smaller 3-month goals, right? Or 100-day goals. Because there you can actually see the effect of what you're doing, the results of what you're doing. And then if you think about 5 years as 18 or 17 100-day journeys, that's so much more rewarding than saying, okay, let's take Dr. with this example. Right? I started with 0 orders a day on my website. My target would have been to get to 5,000 orders a day, which we eventually got to. At 0 orders a day, if I started thinking of 5,000 orders a day, I mean, that's so far away that it's demotivating, right? And if you start thinking of the 5,000 when you're at 0, what about the journey from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,000? And each of those journeys is important. Right? So breaking it up for me has always been much, much more effective than just pie in the sky looking at the long term.
Yeah. And also, we overestimate on what we can do.
And we are impatient in general as people and as generation, but also we over philosophize things, right? The one question a lot of founders ask me now that I'm on the investor side or on the mentor side is, what's the best way to start?
Yeah.
My answer to that question always is the best way to start is to start.
Start, yeah.
Just start.
Yeah.
Right? Make your mistakes and learn.
Yeah.
Instead of philosophizing for 3 months, make 3 months of mistakes.
So are you also the believer of the fact that you start and then figure out later?
Absolutely. Look, I think if you equate any journey as a journey to climb a mountain, right? The idea is that when you're climbing a mountain, you want to reach the summit, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you're climbing a mountain in the Himalayas and you start climbing and there's a landslide somewhere or the weather is not good somewhere else, right? You want to get to the peak, but you may go back down, switch the route, change the path.
Yeah.
You want to get to the same goal. But changing the path to get to the same objective or being flex with that, that's very important. So that's how I would think about it, right? Not what I want to do, I'll figure out. What I want to do, I know. But the path to it, the journey to it, the way I get to it, maybe that I'll figure out.
Yeah. And also a lot of people, and I talk a lot about perfection in this podcast, right? Because a lot of people want to start right, do it right the first time. And in that process of getting it right the first time, they take a lot of time to release that version 1.
Yeah, I'm not a believer in that, right? Because what's right in your mind may not be right in the customer's mind.
Yeah.
And so if you spend so much time philosophizing what you want, you put it out to the customer and 6 months to the customer says, actually is not what I want. So on my podcast, my first ever episode, Rohan Mirchandani from Epigamia said one really nice thing, right? He said, the moment of truth for any product is when a customer takes out rupees from their wallet and pays for the product. And then he switched that actually. He said, actually, Arjun, you're a good salesman.
Yeah.
So you can convince me to buy the product once. When the customer takes out rupees from his or her own wallet and buys the second time without a push from Arjun, that's the moment of truth. Right? And if you think about it, in whatever we are saying, I think until you give the customer the chance to try the product and give you feedback or have that real moment of truth, you never actually know if what you've thought in your mind is right. So Dr. Vaidya's, I started as a new age Ayurvedic product that was for the urban elite millennial consumer. Very quickly, Dr. Vaidya's became a 82% outside the top 10 cities Bharat focused brand. I didn't know that when I started. Had I over philosophized and not started and then not worked with a millennial audience, I would have been in deep trouble.
Yeah. So now that you've mentioned about Dr. Vaidya's, I want to take you back to the times when your grandfather was, working on this and 150 years of legacy in the Ayurveda. Yeah. So what are some of the, sort of traits or the lessons that you might have picked from the grandfather when you were growing up?
See, so look, I think while my family's been in Ayurveda for 150 years, a lot of people think that the legacy of our business was a business. The legacy of our business was not a business.
Yeah.
It was an Ayurvedic clinic that my grandfather and great-grandfather used to run. Why was I inspired to do this? Right? I was inspired to do this because at age 2, I started suffering from juvenile bronchitis. I started suffering from asthma.
Yeah.
I grew up with pumps, nebulizers, inhalers, steroids. Right? So while all the kids around me...
And you healed yourself with Ayurveda.
So while all the kids around me were playing cricket and football, and I'm a huge cricket fan, while all the kids around me were playing cricket and football, my grandfather moved me off the cricket field because there was too much dust on the cricket field. And in Bombay, there's just dust bowls basically, right? Not so grassy cricket grounds that you see in the UK and in Australia and South Africa. So dust was not good for me. So my grandfather moved me off the cricket field. And I was a 7-year-old who had a hand-eye coordination problem trying to play golf. And you can imagine a 7-year-old trying to play golf, right? 99% of the balls you're trying to hit don't get hit. So that was frustrating. Right? While everyone else was playing cricket and football, I was playing golf and squash.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, at birthday parties, they used to serve us Limca, Fanta, Coke, Sprite. Used to jack my throat. So I was the only kid who couldn't have it. I was the only kid who couldn't have ice cream. I remember having ice cream at age 13 for the first time.
Wow.
And I went to Baskin Robbins on a Sunday night. My mom ordered me 1 scoop of vanilla ice cream in a cup, waited for it to melt, and then I had ice cream soup. Because it was too cold to jack my throat, right? And I'd feel sick. So that's what I grew up with. And I always felt like asthma prevented me from having a normal childhood. And 14 years of Ayurvedic treatment later, my grandfather cured me. At 15 and a half, I started playing cricket again. And at that age, I was made the captain of my school cricket team. Right? So I was not the best player on the team. I went to a school where cricket was not a big thing. We had to convince a history teacher from the UK to become our coach.
Okay.
And I wasn't the best player, right? I was the most regular to practice. That's why I was made captain. And where did I learn that from? My grandfather consistently lived the same routine for the 25 years that I knew him, right?
Yeah.
So he woke up every morning at 4:30. He read for 1.5 hours. He had a papaya, went to Willingdon Club, First tee off, played a round of golf, came home, had the same breakfast, wore the same clothes, white safari suit, white shirt, white pants, black shoes, and went to the clinic every day, same time, came back at the same time, ate dinner at the same time, watched the news and went to sleep. For all the time I knew him, this was my grandfather. And so from him I learned consistency. I also learned hard work.
Yeah.
Right? He passed away at age 78, and 1 month before he passed away, he was still in the clinic working.
Wow.
Right? He was someone who loved his work, enjoyed his work,
Yeah.
but believed in putting in those hours, right? At whatever age. So I learned hard work. I learned consistency from my grandfather. I also learned frugality, right? So my grandfather was very well-established doctor. He had 300 patients a day coming to his clinic, 12,000 patients on a monthly basis, writing to him via post. But every day on that white safari suit, he had a 5 rupee red pen in his pocket.
Okay.
And at one point I asked him, like you have mob law pens, you have cross pens, you have all of these pens. You put this red 5 rupee pen in your pocket. He said, that reminds me where I came from.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that.
Wow.
Right? And so he instilled the importance of humility in me as well. So these are the skills I learned from my grandfather.
Yeah.
Or the personality traits I learned from my grandfather. And even though he wasn't around, he had passed away by the time I started building Dr. Vaidya's and taking forward his legacy. I think this will never leave me.
Yeah. And now that you mentioned about humility, Arjun, I met you and then I realized like, hey, you know what? Here's this guy who done, all this crazy stuff. And when I met, it didn't feel like, you come with any of those sort of entitlement. And then, I wanted to ask this in our conversation, like, hey, where did that humility sort of comes from? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, look, I think achievement or no achievement, both my dad and my granddad always remained the same people, right? And I feel like the most accomplished people never change, whatever they are. Look, I think success comes and goes, right? But the person who you are never changes.
Yeah.
And so it just never, it never occurred to me that there is some way I need to be or some way I need to change, right? At all. That this is the person I am, this is the person I'll continue to be, and yeah, that's life.
And in those, do you ever have those moments where you're like, hey, you know what, I've made it, or you have to remind yourself, or
No, not at all. I think, look, I'm fortunate to have gone through an amazing journey. I'm fortunate to exit my company before the age of 30. My job now is to inspire hundreds of people, thousands of people. My goal every year is to inspire at least 1,000 D2C founders. That's my goal. And if I do that, then I've done something of value. What's the biggest success of Dr. Vaidya's, if you ask me this question, right? It's not the awards, it's not the recognition, it's not the funding, it's not the exit. It's that we reached 16,500 pin codes. And we give access to customers in Muzaffarnagar, Imphal, Trichy and Andaman, access to high quality Ayurvedic products and formulations at the touch of their fingertips, which they do not have before. We reach 60% of India.
Yeah.
And that's what drives me.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. So now you mentioned about what you've learned from your grandfather, right? So I want to now sort of think from the mindset perspective, not only from grandfather, but from the family overall. So what would that conversation look like on the dinner table when you were growing up? Like, what are the things that you kept on hearing, which, maybe helped you shape later on in your life?
See, look, I think while I was growing up, right, my dad didn't join my grandfather in the clinic. He wanted to build a brand out of it. He wanted to do what I did eventually, but doctors and businessmen don't see eye to eye. So eventually my dad started his own jewelry and watch business. Started from zero and now runs one of India's most premier luxury jewelry brands called Rose. And I didn't spend as much time with my dad as some other kids did. My dad was always working. Whenever he got time, he spent time with us. As far as possible, he kept Sundays for us. But my dad wasn't the guy who used to come to school. He barely made it to parent-teacher meetings. And it was fine, right? Because I knew he was out there making
doing things
happen for us as a family. And so valuing the time you have together as a family, that's something I learned. But also respecting that, you got to hustle and you got to work hard. I remember when I was 11 or 12 years old, my dad once came to me and he said, hey, I have too much work this summer. Every summer we'd go for a holiday. And just one summer we missed the holiday. He said, I have too much work this summer. Is it okay if we don't go for a holiday? Right? There was one birthday, he said, look, I'm so sorry. I have to be in Hong Kong on this birthday. And we understood that. And it was totally fine, right? And I think that instilling of hard work That instilling of putting the effort, putting the hours in, that came from my dad. And that's what we saw from my dad and granddad at dinner tables. And because they were both entrepreneurs in some sense, when things were bad for me, I could go to my dad anytime and say, this is what I'm going through, and he'd understand. And that was really important. As an entrepreneur, you need a support system.
Yeah.
You need a family that understands when things are tough, how to support, what to do, mentally how to support an entrepreneur. That's really important. And it really helped me to have a family that supported. When the pandemic hit, right, while nobody was willing to come to the warehouse to pack orders, our orders surged. We had the most orders and the least staff. My brother, who works with my dad in the luxury business, there's nothing happening in luxury at that time. He left whatever he was doing and he came to the warehouse and used to pack orders with us. He had nothing to do with our business at all. And by the way, because we were only 6 to 8 people in the warehouse at that time, packing 5,000 orders a day, 7,000 orders a day, we would bring the courier bags, the courier envelopes home with the labels. And so we'd stick the labels at home. Everybody in my house was sticking labels. My grandmother, my mom, my dad, all the staff at home. Everyone in the house was on the floor in the hall sticking labels. That was my first viral LinkedIn post. My grandmom
Packing sticking the label. Yeah. And also you mentioned like how she used to stick the labels on the envelopes.
Yeah, I mean, now it's e-commerce. In my dada's time, it was post, right? Which used to create those PPP postal parcels. So it was normal for her as well.
So when you started Dr. Vaidya's, your success stories is all over the place, right? Like biggest D2C exit and, met this big and stuff like that. But I'm sure, you also shared a LinkedIn post about how, there was no orders and then you went back home on a Friday and then spent the entire weekend locking yourself inside talk about some of those
So by the way, that incident was not no orders. That incident of locking myself in the room was when we had put in 2017 Jan 10 lakhs worth of stock out in the offline market.
Oh yeah, they returned it.
And we got 9 lakhs back.
They returned it.
And that was the biggest failure because we had to pivot our business model. Look, Dr. Vaidya's may seem like a great story today, but it wasn't so easy, right? So we had this offline failure that I talked about. But more than that, Vijay, even when we started online, right? It's not like we got like 10 orders the first day on our website and then became 20, 30, 50. It was like 0 orders a day to 1 order every 3 days to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like we were like increasing 1 order a day types until we got to 50 orders a day 1 year later, right?
So, okay. Before you move further, from there, that 1 year, 50 order, like just 50 orders. And you see like this is like 1 year.
Like the 50 orders overall, not in 1 year.
Yeah.
We went from 0 to 50 orders a day.
0 to 50 orders.
But I'll tell you what was tough in that time, right? And what was good in that time.
Yeah.
What was tough in that time was sometimes like you'd work for 14 hours and you'd go home and your mom would ask like, so how was your day? What did you do? What did you achieve today? Embarrassed to say that we went from 3,000 rupees in sale yesterday to 3,500 rupees in sale today. Like Ivy League educated, topper in school saying I increased my business by 500 rupees today. It was embarrassing. Right? So that was really tough. And look, I come from a family business, right? My dad has built a very successful business. People would say, what are you doing? Like, what are you spending your time on?
Yeah. Did you feel that pressure?
I didn't feel the pressure. I didn't really care for the pressure, but a lot of people would like judge me like, what's going on with this guy? Like he's such a big family business and he's doing this thing on the side that doesn't seem like he'll ever achieve success, right? So I think that was really tough. What was amazing about the first year was it was the most fun year of Dr. Vaidya's because we learned D2C ourselves, right? There was no playbook, there was no history. D2C was not a term in India.
It was not even a term, yeah.
And so
this was which year?
2017 November to 2018 November, right? And so we learned how to build a Shopify website, Facebook and Google advertising. We learned customer engagement. We learned website conversion friendliness. We learned SEO. We picked up every customer call. And that's how we understood our customer. We said, hey, actually, it's not an urban elite customer. It's a tier 2, tier 3 customer. 82% of our orders come from outside the top 10 cities. So the best part about that first year was understanding the business to the core. Once we started scaling, right, no agency could ever take us for a ride because boss, I've operated Facebook ads in the back end, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Trisha has coded a website.
Yeah.
No accountant could take her for a ride because she used to operate Tally herself before the accountants came, right? So I think that was really good. It set the,
That's also the beauty of being an entrepreneur.
it set the
you're doing-
basics and
Yeah.
fundamentals, right?
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
was really nice.
Yeah. Great. So since you mentioned Teresa, I want to sort of, talk about then girlfriend when she sort of came to join the
She
business.
joined the business after we got engaged.
Yes.
So we talked about it when we were still dating. Then we got
Yeah.
engaged, and I want to say 1 or 2 months after we got engaged, she joined the business.
So what are the things that people should look for when they're looking for co-founder? Because, you shared how Trisha coming to the business, like she took load of your,
Yeah, look, I would say one very important, know the person, right? There's nothing like speed dating a co-founder. A lot of people say, where do I find a co-founder? Where should I look? Like,
Yeah.
you're going to spend 5, if not 7, if not 10 years at minimum with this person. You better know what you're getting into, right? At least somewhat, some way. So that's the first one. Have a deep relationship. 2, incentivization alignment, right? Are you both incentivized the same goal? Because otherwise it gets really awkward when one person's working harder, the other's not. One person's really ambitious, the other's like okay at the current scale, growing slowly. So incentivization alignment is the second thing. And the third, but the most important thing actually, is complementary skill sets. If you bring the same thing to the table, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
I started Dr. Vaidya alone. And I can tell you I'm not good at the back end. I'm not good at operations. I'm not good at logistics. I'm not good at the day-to-day. I'm not good at day-to-day accounts. I'm not good at it. I'm a big picture guy, right? I'm a strategy, branding, business development, conversations, going out there, putting it out there. And I manage the factory. Right? That's what I did Dr. Vaidya. Rest of the business I was really bad at. Really bad, right? And so eventually what happened is, until Trisha joined, I realized there was supply chain, there was procurement, there was sort of regulatory at the factory. Then there was sales, distribution, marketing, strategy, and then there was back end, legal, HR, IT, admin, finance. I was 500 at everything with so many departments. I was 25 years old. How do I manage everything, right? And so when I got Trisha on board, I became 9 on 10 at 7 things that I was good at, and she became the rest.
Yeah.
And she was really good at what she did as well, right? And so bringing complementary skill sets together and allocating responsibilities led to the eventual exponential growth as well as compounding of the opportunity of Dr. Vaidya's.
Okay, I want to ask on the same one, Teresa thing, a little different question, okay? Because she was, you guys were dating and then she got engaged and then she got involved with the business as well. So what is it like for the people like who are in a relationship, like married couples and stuff like that? And we do have example of Mama Earth, right? Like Ghazal and Varun sort of building this business together. Like, what are the perks or the cons of, because do you really get time to shut off the business? Like, because you both of you are in the business, right?
Yeah, look, I think we were young when we started. I have heard that founders who have some experience and maturity are able to shut off. We were not able to shut off. Maybe if we do it again, we'll be able to shut off. But for us, there was no work-life balance. It was a work-life merger. There were times when Trisha said, I feel like your colleague, not like your wife or your partner. But like, we really believed in what we were doing, and so it was okay, right? We were the last ones to show up at every wedding, every party. People would say, why are you always late? What are you doing? We're not showing up on time. But we knew what we were building, right? And we knew the potential. And so we went ahead and did it. And it worked out, fortunately for us. Had it not, I don't know what things would have been like. But luckily for us, things worked out.
So what is the worst rejection that you have faced? Not necessarily just in Dr. Vaidya's, like in your life. And what lesson did you take from that?
Oh, I'll talk about 2. Okay.
Sure.
First was in the first 3 months of Dr. Vaidya's. It was just me working in a cabin at my dad's office. That's it. That's absolutely it. There was nothing else, right? So at that time, I remember like I had this like Word doc talking about what Dr. Vaidya's is. Not even a logo, branding, but just a Word doc, right? And
Not even PowerPoint.
PowerPoint tha, but not in a shareable format. So I would share this Word doc on email with people of what I was building. No, I need to hire people, right? That was what I needed to do. And so I got connected to one HR agency. And so I spoke to the person, I pitched my business and shared it and stuff like that. And the person said, so what's your website? I was like, it's under development. We're still doing it. And the person said, I don't engage with people who don't have websites. Thank you, and cut the call.
Oh.
that is 2 months in, like just huge rejection for someone, right?
Wow.
What did I learn from that? If someone comes to me in a similar place, I'll never talk like that to them, right? That was
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Two, so this is 2017 or 18, right? I think 2017 New Year's. So just before New Year's, we had a hangover product called Live It Up, right? So I would
Okay.
send a broadcast out to people saying, hey, like buy one, get one free on Live It Up. Like just reach out, buy it, etc.
Yeah.
This went to 500 family, friends, and vendors, right? People who know me personally have me on WhatsApp. Just like message from me, right?
Yeah,
1 week
yeah.
before New Year. So contextual. It's not randomly saying, I would send like maximum one message a month from my phone. Maximum. This one founder who had raised already $5 million was in my network. $5-7 million. I don't know how much money he had raised. He raised some money basically from credible VCs. I just sent a message like promoting my product, and he said, hey bro, can you please remove me off this list? I don't appreciate these kind of messages. It was huge rejection. He's a founder, he's also building, I'm also building, I'm hustling. It hurt a lot. I removed him off the list, but it really hurt. And then every time a founder messages me or anyone messages me sharing their business, I will make it a point to respond later, but I will say congratulations, awesome, good job.
Yeah.
What do you?
Yeah. I mean,
What do you lose in that? Nothing.
Absolutely.
Nothing at all. But that really hurt me. It stung.
yeah, I can relate a lot with this because, like early on when I was doing this podcast, I would reach out to a lot of people, and one story that stuck with me is there's this, doctor, based in Canada. And I wrote him an email saying that, I would love to invite you on a podcast. And he responded back saying, you know what? Because you had the audacity to reach out to me and write this email, I would say yes and come on a podcast. And that,
Amazing.
that made me feel like, oh my God.
I'm a big fan of cold emails, cold reach outs.
And that, that message is so special to me even today, that sort of gives me that faith and belief in that, hey, you know what, it's, I'm doing right by just being out there and, showing up and reaching out to people.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I can tell you another story in relation to what you're talking about, right? So pandemic hit and Ayurvedic products were like obviously one of the most important essentials at that time. And Zomato had started stores, if you remember, right? Other than just restaurants, they started stores.
Yeah.
So that products could move in cities, right? So I reached out to someone at Zomato and said, I want to create a store of my Ayurvedic products because people want it and they're finding it difficult to get. At least in the South Bombay, 8-kilometer radius from my warehouse, people can get it, right? And that person said, okay, I'll get back to you. And the next day said, hey, I don't think Ayurveda is relevant for Zomato, so we're not going to do it.
Oh.
No, I could have said, yes, okay, that's fine. But I genuinely felt like it was relevant, right? So I just found Dipinder Goel's email and I wrote him an email saying, hi, Dipinder, I'm a big fan of what you do. Here's what I do. Here's our legacy, history, here's what we do. And here's what I want to do with Zomato.
Yeah.
In 15 minutes, he responded saying, Arjun, amazing business, great idea, congratulations. Here's 3 people I'm connecting you to. Have a chat with them, let's get it listed.
Yeah, there you go.
One day later, the same person who said no to me called me and said, we'd love to list your products. What do you lose?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I meet a lot of people, right? And the biggest fear that they have, because I teach people how to create the podcast and stuff like that. And a lot of people tell me that, hey, you know what? The biggest fear that they have is the reaching out. And they're like, hey, you know what? I want to have all these guests. I'm like, have you reached out to them yet? No, I know that the person is going to say no. You have self-rejected yourself.
I agree.
Even before the
Lose
person...
nothing in reaching out. Worst case, the person won't reply. What's the big deal?
Yeah, ignore it. Yeah. So what are 3 lessons from business that you have learned, which you are going to implement, which you implement or are going to implement in your life?
Look, I think 3 lessons from my Dr. Vaidya's journey. First, startups look really glamorous from the outside. Unicorns, funding rounds, exits, all of these things. But it's a grind. It's a roller coaster. And the amount of failure that you will face, nobody's ready for, or I wasn't ready for. And so the hallmark of a good entrepreneur, for me actually, is someone who'll fight failure with grit and resilience and come out of it. Right? I didn't know how much you'd face. Second, you can't do it alone. As young founders, you think you can do everything on your own, right?
Yeah.
Work 16 hours a day, ho jayega. But 2 into 16 is 32, and by the way, you can't work efficiently for 16 hours. So 2 into 14 is 28, or 2 into 12 is 24, but 8 into 10 is 80. And so you can compound the growth exponentially only with an empowered team. And the third one, I'll say it's a little bit more controversial. You can't be slightly pregnant with a startup. A lot of people say, I'm doing my job and then I have this startup, and when it becomes big, I'll leave my job. No. That's not happening, right? Because your startup will never become big until you leave your job and give it full time. You either would be in or you're out when it comes to a startup. If you want to build something of scale. My podcast is my hobby.
Yeah.
If so 1 week I miss it, the world's not coming crashing down. But if 1 week I don't show up at my company, the world is crashing down, right?
Yeah.
And so it's okay to be not in. And it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But if you're in, you have to be 100% in. Those are my 3 lessons from my journey building.
Yeah.
Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are like really, really important lessons, right? Because one of the things that I say, like, if you want to succeed in anything that you do in your life, it's consistency, right? You mentioned about your grandfather, like showing up every single day, like 2 months before him passing away, right? And right now, do you think, like, that kind of consistency for that period of time, like all his life, he did the same, which earlier people used to do that, right? The same kind of job or same business or whatever, like for donkey's years. But do you think, like, we are, as a generation of obviously we are getting like more and more impatient?
Yeah, I think it's not there so much anymore. And it needs to be there. Because startups need a lot of effort and hard work. And I think for me, my moat is consistency, discipline. Right? I may not be the smartest worker, but I'm definitely the hardest worker. And I think we need it to be there more.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't happen automatically, right? You're reading about the unicorn run, but do you know about the 5 years, 7 years of thought process, blood, sweat, and tears that went into it? Like I said on LinkedIn once, ideas are great, but unicorns are made from blood, sweat, and high quality execution.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that you're an investor, do you invest from your head or heart?
I think it's a mix when you do it at the early stage, actually. Because a bulk of when there's no data, you base a lot on people, right? And so I would say 50% of my investment decision made on the founder. 20% on the market size, 30% on the way the business is doing, business economics, growth, velocity, revenue, bottom line, EBITDA, team. But 50% goes on the founder or founding team. And
What do you look in a founder?
the right to win in that specific space, as well as the grit and resilience to be able to fight in the toughest times. And there's not only head that goes into that. Understanding people needs a little bit of heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are some of the like biggest bets that you have taken? Like from just by looking at the founder and like, taking the bet.
So we just announced an investment in a company called Eka Care today. It's a consumer health full stack platform building like Google Pay and Phone Pay built on UPI. The government is creating a digital health infrastructure, digital health stack. So they're building on that. They're the founders of Goai Bibo, Vikalp and Deepak. The moment they so I usually do 1 hour chats with founders when I've never spoken before. In 30 minutes, I said, okay, guys, I get it. I just get what you're building.
What are the questions that you ask?
It's not actually...
or maybe what are the traits that you look for?
No, so I think traits I look for, I said, right? I look for someone who's gritty enough to fight through the tough times.
Yeah.
Not non-realistic or unrealistic. And sees it as it is. But on every call, the first thing I do is I let the founder tell their story, right? And then I ask my questions. Going in with preconceived notions makes no sense.
Yeah.
If you came in with preconceived notions with me, what would you have seen? An Ivy League educated guy who's comes from a family business background, who's grown up in some privilege, entering a market that has a lot of competition in Ayurveda.
Yeah.
Would you have invested in me if you went in preconceived notion? The answer is no. You said this guy doesn't have the ambition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a really good way to look at it, because oftentimes like a lot of people come with the preconceived notion. Aisa hoga.
I've been proved wrong too many times to go in with any preconceived notions.
Yeah. Yeah. Mentors.
Necessity. Absolute necessity. And I didn't have enough while I was building. My dad was one. But I didn't have enough. And I realize now how much time I would have saved had I had the right mentors. And so how am I solving for it now? By saying, okay, let me be the mentor. If I can help people with my experience, that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're faced with a situation in your life, who do you find, going to most of the times for looking for answers? Not necessarily in business, but generally in life.
Yeah, I go to my wife, I go to my dad. Those are two people I usually go to for existential questions.
When you're faced with a difficult situation in life, is there any particular question that you find asking yourself?
What's the worst that can happen?
Okay.
Easier said than done, but what's the worst that can happen?
And what do you do after you have that answer? You still go ahead and do it? Like, okay, this is the worst that can happen. I'm still going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I think it's situation to situation. But what's the worst that can happen gives you a lot of comfort. That it's not death or the world crashing down. It's something a little bit less than that.
Super. So I have last few questions that I ask all the guests. What inspires you to do everything that you do?
I actually don't have. I'm not one of those people who has one thing that inspires me. I just think that the world we live in today and the amount of potential there is in our country, that just keeps me going. Every day I meet so many amazing founders building so many amazing things. It has to inspire you, right?
Yeah.
There's so much going on.
Yeah.
But when I was building Dr. Vaidya, I was taking forward my grandfather's legacy. That sort of inspired me and motivated me to go forth.
3 things, if you were to restart this journey all over again, that you would have done differently.
Built a better team or built an empowered team earlier on, focused on brand earlier than I did, and had some more mentors who are incentivized, right? Like, you can't get time from busy people every week or 2 times a month if they don't have any skin in the game. And I didn't realize that.
What is that number one wrong belief that you've held for the longest period about yourself?
Wrong belief
About yourself.
about myself. I don't know. Actually, I think I'm pretty honest and true to myself in terms of what I am. Maybe I think I thought I panic more than I do in tough situations, and I've been through some in Dr. Vaidya's where I tied it through fine. So maybe overestimating the amount of stress I take in tough situations.
Imagine that you're standing on a stadium, and this is the largest stadium that has ever been built in the history of the world. And there are millions of people eagerly, passionately waiting to listen to you. And the catch is, you only have 1 minute to share the most important lesson that you have learned in your life. What would be your message?
Stay hungry, stay foolish, and keep building. That's it. That's it. That's it. Because, look, I think part of what we do as founders, right, is like I was telling someone the other day, I watched We Crashed, and it seemed like Adam Newman was crazy, but we're all crazy, right? We all have these crazy visions. We all believe in it before anyone else believes in it. There's a fine line between absolute craziness and ambition leading to success. But if you're not hungry and you're not foolish, you can never build something crazy. Think about Flipkart. I mean, now we take e-commerce consumption as a given. But I can tell you in 2013, when I was working my first job in private equity, there were questions being asked in the office like, will Indians buy stuff online? Don't we need touch and feel? Is e-commerce really going to be a thing in India? So that time was an audacious vision, right?
Yeah.
Look where it ended up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Big Billion Day is now part of folklore.
Yeah. True. Super. This has been great conversation, Arjun. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you,
being on the
Vijay.
show.
It's been a pleasure.